In the depth of our being, we will find the authentic truth of ourselves. And you could say that the more we go inside, the more essential things become.
So deep inside of each one of us, there is a tremendous and vivid wish to come home, to return to who we truly are, and to really discover what is it that lies in our essence. Now, our biggest enemy in finding that which we search for, and that which would be the only thing that would really, really fulfill us, the biggest enemy to find that is ourselves. We tend to live on the outskirts, on the slums of our beings. We tend to live in a superficial way, in a way that's far from our core. And when we meet problems, difficult situations, instead of diving deep and finding the tremendous resources that we have there, we create a construct, a mental construct, an idea, an image, a fake personality that will buffer us from reality. And this fundamental mistake of trying to find solutions outside rather than twisting and diving deeper inside, that mistake and how to correct it, and what happens if you correct it, and if you truly dive as a general tendency, day in, day out, generally dive inside. This is the topic of today's lecture, and I hope that it will give you both the tools, but mostly the inspiration, the drive, the fire, that your heart would be ignited to discover again who you are, layer by layer by layer, deeper and deeper with courage, all the way to the core of your being.
So let's see a little bit how we could describe, let's say, the surface level of our being and the depth of our being. I think intuitively for all of you it's pretty clear, the distinction between the two. You probably know yourself how you are when, for example, maybe you are a bit under stress or under pressure and you act in a bit of an automatized way. Typically, that would be something that sort of happens on the surface of our being somehow by some constructs and functional layers that we have put onto ourselves. Whereas maybe when you have a deep talk with someone or a wonderful lovemaking or a moment in nature, you might feel the depth of your being and feel more connected to even to that which unites you with everything else. In a very interesting way, somehow, the deeper we go inside, the more we will also feel connected to everything else. And also in an interesting way, somehow, the more we go deeper inside, the more we become the true, real me. But that means that somehow the false me dissolves within that process. And therefore, the deeper we go inside, the closer we come to the essence that actually connects all things. Freud was describing this phenomena that we have a surface and that we have a depth, quite often in this example of an iceberg that has a little piece of it stick out of the water, which is somehow our surface level and our day-to-day personality, the one that orders something in the restaurant or that gives the money in the supermarket, like the functional level of our being, also the one that sort of gives out the specific image of ourselves and the way that we in general present our personality. Whereas then you have somehow the big underbelly there of the iceberg, which would somehow be well, in Freudian terms, it would be all the unconscious levels of our being, and somehow, subconscious tendencies, archetypal elements, maybe if we go more into Jungian psychology, but for sure just core elements that influence our being. This is definitely something we still know today from this in-depth style psychology, very often to be found in psychoanalysis, that deals with trying to find out what's the real driving force within our being. So if you come with a certain problem and you say, well, I tend to always have depression and I have suicidal thoughts, okay, then we dig in and we see, because naturally, probably you wouldn't want to kill yourself, because that's, it's not very close to the natural needs of our being. So then you would dig inside and you would see, okay, where does this come from? Where do these beliefs rise from within your being? We can, for a moment, look a little bit how the surface level and the depth level are defined. One way of looking upon it that I like quite a lot is how David Data describes it in his books. And he tends to say that you start off with a light that somehow lives in the depth of your being. This light we know from several traditions. We know it as the light of the heart, of the spiritual heart. We know it as the Atman, as the divine spark. We know it as the soul. So there's something inside of us which is essential and lightful and radiant, and somehow it's a light also symbolically, because it is somehow materially present but not necessarily structurally defined. It is pure as light is, and bright as light is, and so forth. So there's a lot within that symbolism. And then Data puts it like that due to the experiences that you have as a child, and this is actually also quite aligned with the models of compassionate communication, you would then paste layers on top of that light. So if, for example, as a child you experience, well, my sister is already the pretty one, so then I can be maybe the smart one. So let's put a layer that says the smart one, and that sort of defines us. And then later on I find out, well, but if I want a spouse, then also it's quite good to also be a bit pretty. So I'm not defining myself as pretty, which is funny in the first place, because the light is really everything. But I have already put a layer that says you're not the pretty one, you're the smart one. But now I'm trying to be pretty, so I will put a layer on top, which is like I'm going to pretend that I'm pretty, even though we all know that I'm the smart one. And then you put another layer on top. And then maybe you go out in the world and you present yourself like that, and people are a bit like, yeah, you're okay. And then I build another layer from that, and it's like, okay, I'm the reasonably attractive one, but not super hot or whatever, right? And you put layers and layers and layers on top of that, which then those layers, which will be somehow the most visible to the world, these encrusted layers that are not your light, they will be visible to the world. But actually, as you would pierce through them, the power, the intensity of the light that would be beyond that is way bigger than a bit of a crust on top of it. Let's see a bit the descriptions in the slide. You have here a few points that sort of describe the two levels, and they stand in balance to one another. So at the superficial level, you have less power. The actual power is deep within your being. The light is deep within your being. On top is just some crust that is hiding the light. So the actual power comes from within. Also, if you think of the iceberg, if you consider that all your tendencies, behaviors, and so forth will be driven by the entirety of your being, then the depth wins, because the depth is much, much bigger than the little thing that sticks out. So the power of our being lies within the depth of our being. Then you have there the easier to be faked and more authentic. So on the surface level, you will have the ego, let's say, will have the opportunity to present itself in a certain way. On the surface level, you can play around a little bit and put like a snapshot in front of your face and be like, okay, this is who I am today. But in that, you don't reveal the depth of your being. The ego likes this quite a lot, as we will see. the ego mind that tries to define ourselves in a specific way that is easy to control, that is much, much easier done at the superficial level, because when we go into the depth of the being, the ego will get in trouble because we might find out that we are actually everything. In the depth of our being, we will find the authentic truth of ourselves, and you could say that the more we go inside, the more essential things become. So in the depth of the depth of the depth of the being lies our true essence, who we really are, our divine spark, our soul, and so forth, which stands completely independent from influences of the mind and the ego and the society and so forth. That depth of essence is completely immutable. It is unchanging. It has always been watching. It was never born. It will never die. All of these wonderful aspects. So it is the most authentic thing that you can find, that light inside. And then basically on your way down there, you become more and more essential, more and more authentic. The further you go away from that light, the easier you will have it to put up a show. But of course, that will not necessarily represent who you are deep inside. For example, the show off, well, I'm not really the pretty one, but I'm pretending to be the pretty one. Something like that. Then you have here, on the superficial level, that it is quite influenceable, at least by imagination. So the mind and the ego both can play a lot with the aspects on the superficial levels. This is somehow where the ego mind lives. Whereas when we go deeper inside, there we will find that which has actual life inside of us. If you look again at the encrusted light, the crust doesn't have life in it, but the light does have life in it. So at the surface level, you have somehow the residues of life, some leftovers that you collected there and that somehow are stuck together in something that we call a personality. And they are very, very easily confused, very easily influenced by thoughts that we might pick up from other people, from our own little worries and doubts and fears and so forth. So imagination influences a lot what is going on the surface level. Whereas, and you might have had moments like that, when you dive deep inside, even though your mind was just really agitated just now and was full of doubts and full of imaginations and fears and worries and desires and all sorts of stuff, then you dive deep inside and then you relax, and then it's like, oh, in the actual real alive light inside of me, that is not influenced by 1,000 different things that pull me back and forth, I'm actually at peace. There's no need to be doubtful about anything. There's no need to imagine I don't know what scenario, because I feel at peace, I feel I'm with myself, and so forth. On the superficial level, we have this dependence on the outer world. And also this goes together with the last point, that the superficial level is somehow always constructed. So already in the example that I gave from David Data, that surface level, it was constructed by different experiences that were had, right? Whereas if you go back to the light deep inside, it's simply raw in itself, just the light, without any other concerns about it. It stands for itself. It cannot be, it will not change its light by what is going on in the outer world. But we can, of course, cover that light, and that constructed cover is what we would call the surface of our being. Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra, and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.